The Andrews government is relying heavily on there actually being a climate crisis and enough people believing that it's happening. I mean, that government has just demolished coal-fired power plants and is backing the building of hundreds of offshore windmills. Do you think the climate narrative is losing its credibility, and will this affect the Victorian election in November?
Look, what will affect the Victorian election, indeed all elections with this climate business, is when people start feeling pain. Never forget that Kevin Rudd, did make a meal of climate change in 2007. It was one of the things, we can't forget, that catapulted him into the lodge. 2-3 years later, when he actually started to work out how to deal with climate, how to cut emissions, and was waving around his emissions trading scheme, that is when you saw an enormous groundswell of opposition to it, because people are willing to go along with a lot of this stuff until they realise that climate action isn't all windmills and bike paths. It actually will, by definition, require a change to how we live. And let me tell you something, when Australians are paying $3 a litre or somewhere north of there for a litre of petrol, they ain't going to be climate warriors anymore. Similarly, when Victoria, which we're warned about from the energy market operator, when Victoria runs out of gas, people can't take hot showers anymore. I think you'll see a lot more people saying, hang on, why is it we have to wear all this pain? Why do we have to be the forefront of climate action? I think you'll find the debate changing very, very quickly.
Another debate that could change pretty quickly is to do with COVID. The Health Minister, Mary-Ann Thomas, in Victoria, is going to sit on 2 independent investigations, which she's got in her hands. These investigations are into the COVID response, and she's going to sit on them till, conveniently, after the election. This can only mean the reports are critical of the government, in my opinion. Gideon, will this backfire on the government?
It's hard to say. I do tend to think that anybody who has a bad opinion of Dan Andrews, they generally know how they feel by now. And the problem for Matthew Guy and the Liberals is a lot of that vote will actually be a lot of the anti-Dan vote will be in safe Labor seats. So there's a bit of an uphill battle there. Don't forget the people in safer Liberal seats, the seats that are under threat from these ridiculous Teal characters, those are people who, had it pretty good during the pandemic. They just sat at home in their jammies on Zoom for a couple of years. That said, there's a reason why these reports aren't coming out, and I think that even among people who are sympathetic to lockdowns or bought into the COVID hysteria, I think they won't want to know that it's all for nothing, and that's what might be in the body of these reports that we won't find out. But the most puzzling thing is, if any other, can you imagine if it was Dennis Napthine or Dominic Perrottet or Scott Morrison who were sitting on reports like this so close to an election? We would never hear the end of it. But Dan, as is often observed, nothing seems to tarnish his reputation, because I think it's priced into his stock. People know that there's something a bit iffy about Dan Andrews, or they have the sense that there's something a bit iffy about Dan Andrews, but he manages to project this getting things done persona, which seems to make it all okay again. He's a very, very difficult political phenomenon to understand.